I've often walked past this giant monument here in Southsea. It towers high in the sky and looks out towards the English Channel. It's called the Portsmouth Naval Memorial. It's just 50 minutes from my house. It commemorates sailors who have died at sea in the First and Second World War with no known graves. My grandmother's youngest brother, John, would have been one of those names. Many of my grandfather's friends were lost at sea when their ship was torpedoed during the Second World War. As I reflect on the monument, my first impression, it's both stark and humbling. Approximately 25,000 British Commonwealth sailors were lost in the World Wars, around 10,000 sailors in the First World War and 15,000 in the Second World War. For me, Remembrance Sunday offers us an opportunity to reflect and think back and simply say, thank you. We are so grateful for the lives of all the men and the women we will never meet because of their lives were sacrificed in the name of freedoms we enjoy today. It also makes me think and be thankful for all our local servicemen and women and families that are a part of our lives today. I was born during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West, where propaganda, nuclear threats and military forces were continually on high alert. Since then, our local troops have been involved in the Falklands, the Baltics, Iraq, Afghanistan and the War on Terror. It's very easy in a consumer society to believe that the world owes us. We live in the age of entitlement where our needs are marketed to and our whims are placed at the centre of the world. Remembrance Sunday reminds us that no man is an island. We all stand on the accomplishments and hard-won freedoms of the previous generation. One memorial simply says, they died so we could live. Evolutionary history tells us that success is about the survival of the fittest. The rich and the powerful rule the roost. It's not so much blessed are the poor in spirit. It's more like blessed are those with the biggest stick. It's interesting that the Judeo-Christian faith celebrates humility and thankfulness, not power and entitlement. The meek inherit the earth. That's why it's really important for us to be thankful. It produces in us an explosion of something that is unnatural to our flesh and our bones, humility. Humility is not denying your strengths, but being real about your weaknesses. Humility could seem to be weak, but really, if we encounter it, it releases a presence of God's grace. The God of Christianity says he opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. This is how we know what love is. 1 John 3:16 says, Jesus Christ laid his life down for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. A clear picture of love and sacrifice triggers thankfulness, and thankfulness is a doorway that leads to humility, and humility then leads to grace, and grace leads towards empowerment to act. It's so counterintuitive. But if you are struggling with change and crisis like we all are right now, one of the best things we can do is start to write down every day things we're thankful for. And guess what? Empowering grace will start to follow us. The word memorial comes from the French word mémoire, or Latin memorialis, which means to belong to a memory. Like all good pieces of art, a monument should make us reflect back, question and learn. After all, history can repeat itself. Civilization can lose its civility. The monument stands tall, pointing up towards heaven, and it reminds us that our world, the world that we are responsible for, is deeply broken, right in its foundation. It's not subtle, ethereal. This is not like an Agatha Christie movie, Death on the Nile, I wonder who killed Vincent. No, this is monumental. It shouts aloud. It's obvious. Our world needs saving. Certainly religion hasn't solved the world's problems. Have you noticed that bringing rules into a marriage and leaving love outside of the front door just causes even more relational separation? A lack of faith hasn't helped much either. A good friend of mine would always say, I don't believe in God and I believe in these, and then he would stretch out his hands towards me. In other words, he would say, I believe in my power, my hard work, I do things my way. And it kind of sounds good when you're young and you're healthy and you've got opportunity, but large parts of society just simply don't get the chance to express their freedoms. Life is deeply unfair, unjust in large parts of our world. Paul, writing to a group of Christians in Rome who are deeply religious, says you need God's mercy. You need something outside of tradition. You need forgiveness and a living relationship with God. He then also says to the non-religious who have tried to do it their own way, that's not enough. Now, this monument shows that human way and human ways are not enough. You need God's mercy. You need to look towards the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross for your sins. Why? Because it produces thankfulness that produces humility and then empowering grace. Romans 12 reads, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing and perfect will." Paul says, present your bodies as living sacrifices. That sounds like some kind of weird spiritual S&M, doesn't it? But in ancient Jewish culture, an animal would be sacrificed to represent atonement for sin. It was a symbol that there were spiritual consequences for corporate and personal injustice. Put it this way, if someone drives into your garden wall, you pay the bill, they pay the bill, or you split the costs, but someone has to pay for the infringement. We live in a culture that likes to think that all truth is relative to the individual. In other words, truth depends on what side of the fence you're standing on. It's all good, as my neighbour used to say, each to their own. It sounds good until someone infringes on your human rights or crashes into your car or through your fence in this case. Then suddenly truth is not relative. We cry out for something else. We cry out for justice for what's most true. Jesus claimed that his life would be the last sacrifice for once and for all the world's pollution, to bring about final justice, the big lies, the small white lies, for the mass evil that produces wars and the everyday tantrums that we display when we don't get our own way. Sin isolates us from a relationship with God. Our greatest need is forgiveness and a renewed relationship with God. So when Paul says we are to be living sacrifices, he's not saying the more depressed we look, the more spiritual morbid we become, the closer we are to God. He's saying, in view of God's mercy, let's offer our best of our lives over to God. Because of Christ's sacrifice, our lives can become a sacred gift back to the world. Let's offer our dreams, our time, our energy, our life force over to God. So, how do we do it? We do it by not conforming, but by being transformed by the renewing of our minds. The 25,000 names on this wall are a symbol of something else, the fact that humans are not prepared to conform. When pushed, they will traverse unsurmountable odds. They will sacrifice everything. They will navigate the globe to protect freedom. If we're honest, this has been a hard and tough season for most of us. There's no doubt that crisis and change and criticism brings added emotional pressure. But it's also a great revealer or exaggerator of what's inside of us. Pressure could take us in two kind of directions. We could conform, or we could use the pressure to transform. We could conform and become deeply divided in this time. Have you noticed how isolation has highlighted divisions in culture, race, politics, even postcode, north and south divide here in Britain? We could conform and just join in with the blame game and rant all the time. We could conform and become even more isolated, because that's the national direction of travel right now. Or we could become a people who transform. We could become a transformed people. We could develop new thinking or renewed thinking and unite. We could become problem solvers instead of problem makers. We could reach out to the one. We could send a card, send an encouraging word. We could invite someone out for a walk in this time. This is an incredible opportunity for the church right now, today, to stand in the gap. Generations are known for what they choose to fight for. The suffragette movement, the women's right to vote, Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement. This monument stands as a bastion of man's fight to remain free from tyranny. One of the greatest battles coming to light pre-COVID was loneliness, but today, with the pandemic, it just seems like that problem has been amplified 1,000,000 times over. COVID-19 keeps us isolated, but it doesn't define who you are, what you think, or your future, because we are called to be a transformed people. Every time there's a sharp change, we must think, what opportunity has God presented us with in this moment? The greatest need in the world right now is connection. Dr. Henry Cloud, a prominent psychologist, says the foundation of emotional health is relationships and connectivity. In fact, Jesus said our greatest sign of spiritual health is connectivity with God and with one another. We're told to love God with all our heart, all our emotions, our mind, our energy, and then to love our neighbour as ourselves. But here's our challenge. It's actually possible to be around people at work or at college or school, but still feel completely alone. You know, if you feel alone in your thoughts, you need to let people know. You need to let them inside. You know, you were designed to flourish by letting people know what's going on in the internals of your heart and mind. It might look mystical and authentic to look at a mountain man sort of wandering off into a forest, but actually there's no real lone rangers making smart choices. We were created for one another. The New Testament commands us over 100 times to love, to care, to forgive, and to encourage one another. Mental health professionals argue that depression is caused by the feeling of loss. Often our nurture and relational tank that needs to be refilled can be running on empty. You know, when my wife lost her mum after already losing her dad as a toddler, she became deeply depressed. Now, medication could help her, but she said the thing that pulled her out the most was connectivity, forging positive relationships with others who could lift her up. Families literally in her local church, unsung heroes that we don't know, I don't know, gathered around her and nurtured her back to health. You know, did you know that positive relationships and healing go together? If you've become isolated over this time, if you are alone in your thoughts, please connect with us. Go to connect@nlccuk.org. I'd love to give you a hug right now, but we can't do that, so please get hold of us. Church history has shown us that crisis can become an opportunity for Christians to change history. When the plagues of the first 2 centuries ravaged their way through the Roman Empire, the Roman man gods, the Caesars, fled to Asia Minor. And instead of fleeing, the early Christians, they got brave. Instead of moving out, they moved into the cities, nursing the sick and the dying. And this became the beginning of the modern-day nursing movement we know today. Instead of running away, they flourished in the moment to save the one. One of our modern-day plagues pre-COVID was loneliness. Despite technology giving us more information than ever before, people have never felt so alone. Maybe this is actually our opportunity in history to provide relationships of hope that bring about a nurture revival in a community that has lost its sense of belonging. Everything that relied on big gatherings is on pause right now, but now we have a new opportunity to connect back to the one, to encourage the one, to mentor the one, to disciple the one, to phone the one. I truly believe that whoever carries the most hope through this season will carry the most fruit into this new year. Be a carrier of hope to the one. When a baby's born into your world, what are you meant to do? If you were its emotional architect, how would you build up its life? Well, you could decorate its room, you could buy ample amounts of nappies, a car seat would be great. The most important thing you can do, the only thing you can really do when a baby is crying, which is its way of saying, I need help, is to hold it in your arms and provide connection, a bond of nurturing, of love and protection. You know, we can meet people's physical needs, and that's important, but if their emotional needs are not met, they remain empty. Child healthcare professionals would tell us that if a baby is not nurtured correctly in its early years, often its immune system won't fully develop. Its growth is stunted. It has behavioural problems and depression later on in its life. The world is full of good-looking, I think, talented, well-intentioned adults now who have no idea why they are frustrated and running on empty. The answer is their emotional cups need filling with acceptance, nurture and oneness. They might think the answer is becoming like the mountain man or escapism of some kind, but they need to find healing in partnership and in connections with other human beings. Human beings that overflow with love and with hope and with faith. So what can we do today? The answer is be the church and provide space for people to be nurtured one to one, and when possible, get together in smaller groups. The primary way that people will re-find emotional health is through rekindling, nurturing relationships. That's priority and it's foundational. We, by design, are created for Him and for one another. God is the only self-sustaining being. We are the created and designed to be fueled in nurture, in loving friendships with God and people. Okay, it's okay to be vulnerable. This is not the time to fake it till you make it. Make space with the people in your environment where they can just be honest about their state and where they're at. Let's create environments where people aren't condemned or ashamed. Don't be afraid of admitting you have problems. We all have them. Fake spirituality is pretending you have your life together, but people in this time, more than ever, are looking for authenticity, not more information. One-to-one care in relationships. You know, Philip Colwell, who succeeded Henry Ford, said, "You are not the problem, you have a problem, and if you tell me what the problem is, we can work together to fix it." Admitting vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage to make positive change. The foundation of emotional health is connectivity, and it's the foundation of spiritual health too. Paul says in Colossians 2:2, "My goal is that you may be encouraged in heart and knit together in love." This epidemic separates us, but it does not define us. It could be, in fact, our greatest opportunity to unite and to knit people back together in love, one person at a time. So my prayer this Remembrance Sunday is that we may rediscover thankfulness that leads to humility that then empowers grace. In view of the sacrifice of so many people, in view of Christ's sacrifice on the cross for our sin, may we offer the best of our time, our energy and our talents back to God. May we not lose sight that this is our time in history to stand in the gap for others. May it be said of us that when the pandemic hit and everyone was isolating, Christians restored the nurturing heart back to society. They innovated, they prayed, they discipled the one. And may we choose not to conform to the patterns of our time, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds, that we may see a transformed society.